Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, today on the Dungeon Dive, we have a top 10 solo RPG things. And I'm calling this things because this list is divided into tools and things to help facilitate solo role-playing and some games. So the first part of the list is going to be tools and things, and then the second part of the list is going to be games. But before we kick things off, I did want to give a few honorable mentions just because there are so many awesome things in this kind of subcategory of tabletop gaming. This little sector of solo role-playing games and tools and systems and things has just produced so many cool things, and it's so hard to narrow it down to 10. So I wanted to talk about a few things that just didn't quite make this list. First up is Tri-Cube Tales. Now, we will be taking a more detailed look at Tri-Cube Tales soon, but this is a simple little system that uses 3d6, and it uses a kind of an Arkham Horror system, the system that I'm using for my game, where you fives and sixes. You're rolling a pool of dice and you're looking for fives and sixes as successes. I always love that in a game. That's one of my favorite kind of dice mechanisms. But the coolest thing about Tri-Cube Tales is it's made for either solo or for traditional play. And there are a whole bunch, just a huge wealth of little micro settings that you can buy on DriveThruRPG. And if you're looking for something for one-offs, I think Tri-Cube Tales is one of the better systems. And one of the main reasons why it's not on this official top 10 list is just because I haven't played it enough to make that determination. But we will be taking a closer look at Tri-Cube Tales soon. Another honorable mention here is two things from Shield Dice Studio, and these two things together are very valuable, and that is the Sandbox Creator and the Scenario Builder. So the Sandbox Creator will give you your big, wide, kind of epic scope on your landmass, your kingdoms, creating your continents, and you use that by dropping some dice using a dice drop system along with a deck of cards. So with this, you can very quickly create a big landmass to explore. And then when you want to zoom in with your microscope, with your telescope, zoom in down to the micro setting, we have a scenario builder. And so the scenario builder also uses a deck of cards. And this is how you can create interesting little scenarios with timers and traps and hazards and all kinds of things. These two things together are very, very handy. The next honorable mention is from Black Oath Entertainment, and that is Broken Shores. Broken Shores, of course, was originally released as God Shard, but as Alex T found out, God Shard was already as a title was already copywritten. And so he had to re-release the book as Broken Shores. I think the cover looks better now in black and white. And this is kind of a 1.2 version of Godchart. It incorporates some of the feedback he had gotten from some reviewers, including the Dungeon Dive. But this is a really cool little system, especially if you like dark fantasy, especially if you like nautical fantasy, if you like survival horror. This is a system for you. For me, I find a lot of the Black Oath Entertainment stuff a little bit too detailed. There is a lot going on in these books, and I'm often forgetting rules and forgetting where tables are and just forgetting the procedures while I am playing. You're going to notice during this list that I prefer things that are a lot more on the simple side, but I think Broken Shores sits in a kind of a really nice medium spot in between one of their older games, which is Disciples of Bone and Shadow, which is really complex, just overflowing, just an abundance of stuff in that game, and a kind of a stripped down Sacrifice, which is another game from Black Oath Entertainment. This sits right in between those two. So if that sounds like something you might want to check out, do check out Broken Shores. I have a very, very detailed video on Godshard. Next up, we have 2d6 Dungeon. 2d6 Dungeon is just something that I haven't played enough to include on a top 10, but I can see it very quickly getting there. As far as the solo RPGs that focus on dungeon crawling, 2d6 Dungeon might be the best. This thing is just absolutely jam-packed, overflowing, filled to the brim with random things to find in a dungeon. 2d6 Dungeon is very close to a dungeon simulator. And if you're looking for something that really gets into the details of exploring a dungeon, 2d6 Dungeon is the game for you. I am waiting for everything to be delivered from the Kickstarter to really dive into the game. And everything includes these 2 books. It includes another expansion book and some decks of cards to help facilitate play. Now, 2d6 Dungeon was definitely standing on the shoulders of giants, and I think those 2 giants are 4 Against Darkness and D100 Dungeon with the World Builder expansion. All 3 of these are pretty light on the role-playing part of the game. They kind of harken back to the early days of just dungeon crawling in Dungeons and Dragons. Or if you like old school PC RPGs like Bard's Tale or Wizardry or Might and Magic, these games simulate those kinds of RPGs very well on your tabletop. D100 Dungeon with the World Builder is awesome because it allows you to leave the confines of the dungeon and go on a massive hex crawl and just create all kinds of cool adventures and have all kinds of interesting encounters in an open world environment. And I love it. It's so good. And then if you really want to focus on the dungeon crawling, but you also want just an overflowing, just a huge amount of supplemental material and expansions, then 4 Against Darkness is the game for you. 4 Against Darkness has so many expansions. I don't know, there's like 30 books or something, all dealing with different kinds of dungeons and different kinds of characters and encounters. One of the issues with 4 Against Darkness is actually there's 2. The core book is pretty slim, and I think you will get bored of just the core book pretty quickly. Now, I have a very detailed playlist on a whole bunch of 4 Against Darkness stuff, and we will be returning to that playlist soon. And I do also have a video that is my suggestions on what to get if you want to get into 4 Against Darkness. The other negative against 4 Against Darkness is the rules are kind of all scattered about, not only in this one book, but in all of the other books. And it really does need a full rules compendium or at least a universal index of where to find everything. Because there are things that you might find in one book that reference another book. And if you don't know where it is in that book, it takes a long time to search through everything to find it. Okay, so those were the honorable mentions. So now we're going to get into the top 10. And the first part of this list is all about different kinds of tools to help facilitate solo play. And coming in at number 10 is the Sandbox Generator from Atelier Clandestine. So I did a huge video on this, nearly a 40-minute long video, where I said that this book is worth its weight in gold. And I think that I stand by that statement. If you're looking for a hex crawl generator, if you are looking for a really fast and really fun way to create a hex world that you can explore as a solo RPG, I cannot recommend the Sandbox Generator any more than I am right now. It has everything you need. It has your landmarks, your settlements, layers, dungeons, all kinds of different generators, magical landmarks, natural landmarks, artificial landmarks, different kinds of encounters and features that you can find all over the place. This book might be worth the price of admission just for the dungeon generation portion. The dungeons are really cool because while you are creating your overland map, as you explore dungeons, you go down into the Underdark, the underworld, and the dungeons might connect to other hexes in your overland map. So you really get the sense that you're creating a full world, kind of like the newest Legend of Zelda game, the newest, Breath of the Wild, Tears, I can't remember what it's called, but the new one that came out for the Switch has that whole kind of underworld area that also connects to the overworld. Very similar type of thing there, and I love that. That is super cool. Tears of the Kingdom, that's what it's called. The one negative of Sandbox Generator, it is very limited in the biomes that it has to offer, because we only get 5 biomes, I think. We get grasslands, forests, hills, marshes, and mountains. And so it does need more diversity, more variety in the biome area, but that is very easily alleviated by just adding your own and just coming up with a really quick system of how to add your own. But I think it could be a little bit expanded in that area. But Sandbox Generator for hex crawling and for dungeon creation is awesome. Okay, coming in next is Untold Encounters of the Random Kind from Loke Battle Mats. I've done a huge detailed video on this before, but this is a fantastic book of random encounters, and it's broken up into towns, wilderness, and dungeon encounters. But in each one of those, you get subcategories, such as in towns, you get castles, cemeteries, docks, guild quarters, high street, lanes, noble quarters, rural, slums, and undercity. And each one of those has its own custom D100 table of encounters. So that is so many random encounters just in towns. And then in wilderness, we get subtables for Arctic, desert, forest, mountains, plains, sea and shore, swamp and jungle, and wilderness boons. And each one of those has its own D100 table that you can roll on. And then when you find a dungeon, when you get into the dungeon, you will have rules for building your dungeon. And then you have all these D100 tables for dungeon encounter types. We have dungeon boons, doors, enemies, environmental hazards, interactions, and intrigues. And like I said, yeah, each one of those subsections has its own D100 table. And then all of the various encounters, the descriptions are all collected at the end of each larger section. This book is fantastic. It is so easy to use, and when you're playing a solo RPG, one of the most important things is being able to keep the game going, and doing that by finding what you need quickly so you don't have to leave the game and go into a rule book. And that's one of the best things about this book. It's just how quick, how snappy it is to find what you need to continue that play. Now, I think one of the negatives about this book is some of the encounters are a little too silly or whimsical or lighthearted for me personally. Now, I love whimsical and lighthearted games. You guys know Pauper's Ladder is one of my favorite games. That game, it couldn't be more lighthearted or whimsical. But when I'm playing solo RPGs, I typically like to play in a more sword and sorcery style setting. And so I would love to see this book kind of just slightly rethemed more towards sword and sorcery style fantasy rather than high or epic fantasy. But that is just a personal preference. This book is amazing, and that's why it is at number 9 on this list. Okay, at number 8, we're moving from the huge, wide, and epic down to the very narrow and the very focused, and that is Axebane's Deck of Many Dungeons. Deck of Many Dungeons is, as it says, a very quick and handy way of creating random dungeons. And this deck of cards is so awesome. It's kind of a standard deck of cards. You have your suits and your numbers. What you are seeing here is the main game or the main tool with 2 of the expansions mixed in. You have your kings here, which are your objective rooms, your quest goals. And then all of your other cards are just your various corridors and rooms for dungeons, but they will include tables such as traps and smells, monsters, magical crystals, different treasure that you can find. You can use the art to trigger things such as maybe you have to bust through these doors, or there's a crack in the floor that you might have to walk around. There are breaks and chasms that you might have to jump. There are secret doors that you can find, and you can very, very easily use this deck to come up with a neat adventure. You could just randomly draw out a few cards. And here, let's say your character here was coming into the dungeon. There's a secret passage over here. There's a trap that they might trigger in this corridor. They can move up here to where they can explore these various rooms. There has a D10 chart for what you can find in those rooms. And then maybe they come over here and there is a magical pool with a D12 D12 table on a magical pool. You also have other tables that come with this game here, with this tool here. We have NPCs and quest items. We have different instructions for using the deck. We have a random trap generator, a random quest generator, and then more NPCs and quest items and minor or carried treasure. So if you're looking for a very quick way to generate quests and random dungeons, then I cannot recommend the Deck of Many Dungeons more. One thing I would like to see is just more, and that's my main criticism for this game, for this tool here, is I just want more. I would like to have more different kinds of dungeons, maybe a forest exploration deck, I would just like to see Axebane expand on this and give us more variety and more things to use. Okay, and sticking with the deck of cards, because a deck of cards is my favorite kind of tool, and this might be cheating a little bit. It's a whole group of cards, all from one company, and that is Inkwell. And these are the Inkwell side quest decks and the NPC decks. I absolutely love buying these things. I like collecting them. They are so useful with so much information, and they make playing games very easy. And because you can generate all of your little quests, all of your quests that you need by simply drawing a card. And I like how they're broken up into different genres. We have the Lovecraftian and paranormal, 50 adventure and outline maps and cards for your Lovecraftian adventures. We have pulp adventures. We have monster hunting adventures. We have adventures set in coastal towns or maybe at the high seas with pirates and ports. We have wilderness and frontier encounters or political and urban encounters, or the always famous or the always popular here, the dungeon, caves, and ruins fantasy side quests. And then we have a whole bunch of different NPCs. So if you need to generate NPCs quickly, these decks are pretty cool because on one side, you will have a pretty nice portrait of a whole bunch of different kinds of NPCs. As you can see, there is a lot of variety in the ancestries and the races and the nationalities. And then on the back of each card, you will have all of their details. So let's say we are encountering this NPC here. This is Veska Rothfelder, a halfling, a taxidermist, and a tailor. And then we will get their personality, their quirks, needs, secrets. This section here for the NPCs is always useful in generating side quests on the fly. And then we have things that they can be used as leverage and a little bit of background and a quote by the NPC. And so these are very useful as well because coming up with NPCs on the fly can be a challenge to the solo role player. So we have frontier townsfolk, coastal townsfolk, and then henchmen and hirelings. And the side quest decks themselves are all pretty similar in how they are laid out. On one side of the card, you will have a map, and this is where that particular adventure takes place. And as you can see, there are a huge variety of different places that the adventures can take place. And then on the reverse side, you will have all of the information about that adventure. So this here, we have the Poison Forge. An ancient golem has reawakened and is gathering venomous snakes and massive vermin to use as ingredients for weapons for a long finished war. Okay, that's a pretty interesting adventure there. We have different ways of getting the PCs involved. Now, these are all written for standard role playing with a GM and other players. So you do have to manipulate and twist and kind of customize these for the solo play, but it's pretty easy to do. You will get ways of getting the PCs involved. So you will have your hooks. You will have your various encounters in this adventure, and then you will have different ways to follow up the adventure. So yeah, all of these have that same thing, just depending on the setting, depending on the genre, depending on the kind of game you're playing. I just like buying them all. When I see that a new side quest deck is available, and I get all of these on Amazon, and I buy them and just have fun looking at them, and they're very handy and very useful. Okay, and coming in at number 6, speaking of useful decks of cards, we have the Outdoor Encounter cards from Phil Reed. These things are just awesome. If you're looking for a deck of cards to be used for solo role playing when you are outdoors, when you are having a wilderness adventure, and you are working in a very kind of sword and sorcery style setting, you can't get better than this Outdoor Encounter deck. Now, this is 4 decks combined, and you can get all of these from DriveThruRPG. And the cool thing about these, the best thing, is just each one of these cards has art, it has flavor, and it has rules of the encounter. So you get a little bit of each important element in a deck of cards. And what I like doing with these is using them to physically represent a map. And when I'm playing, I would say that we are doing certain things. Maybe choose one of these cards to be your objective. So maybe you're looking for this dungeon. And in this world, we need to find this dungeon and take care of this monster that is in the dungeon. So I would take that card, and then I would take a number of other cards. and shuffle all of those up together, and then create a landmass. So instead of creating a hex map or a grid map, we are actually creating a map out of these cards. And this map represents the landmass that we are exploring. This could be either an island or some kind of just a general kingdom, a general geographical area that we are exploring in. And then I would take my character, and just start working through the map like I would in a board game, basically turning this over. Okay, so we came across a demonic statue over a dozen feet tall and standing in a clearing near the roadway. The statue looks as evil and wicked as anything you have seen before. The statue is carved from stone and looks to have been here for several years. Okay, what does that mean? Well, we can role play that. We could maybe there's some ruins on the side there. There are some ruins there. Maybe we could decipher those, and we learn a clue about where the dungeon is. And so then we head north from there, from the demonic statue, and we come across a hanging hand. Maybe from there, we move to the west here, and we come across a cult assault. And we can head north from there after dealing with that cult. And there we have found the dungeon that we are looking for. Now we're in the dungeon. We're trying to track down that beast. Perhaps from this point on, we go back to our other tool, our deck of mini dungeons. And now we use this tool to continue this adventure. When we get out of the dungeon, maybe we come out over here, and then we would flip that over. And so all you really need is a simple system of rules to play. And with these 2 decks of cards, you can have all kinds of different wilderness and dungeon adventures. So I love decks of cards because of just the different ways that you can use them, laying them out like that, shuffling them, drawing a card at random, different ways you can stack cards. Just cards are very, very useful to use in a very practical gameplay environment. Okay, coming in at number 5, and it should be no surprise, and that is Table Fables 1 and 2 from Madeline Hale. 2 of the most ubiquitous tools in the whole world of solo role-playing. These 2 books, these 2 slim volumes, are overflowing with interesting and useful tables for generating things on the fly. They are very well written, they are well designed, and they are affordable. And I've got both of these on Amazon. Table Fables 1 has all kinds of tables for generating characters, items, areas, and miscellaneous things. So again, just lots of tables. And the cool thing is that all of these tables are keyed for certain rolls of dice, for certain D100s or D10s, D4s, D6s, D8s, and so on. A lot of times when I buy these random encounter books of tables, they aren't keyed for dice rolls. They will have 127 different encounters, and that's not very practical or useful. If I can't roll up something quickly, then I find a table to be not very useful. And I've ordered quite a few books from Amazon that have lots of random tables, and they're not keyed for dice rolls, and that's really weird to me. I'm not sure how useful 57 encounters are. I don't want to read through the encounters. I want to roll up a random encounter. And so you don't need to get creative with your dice rolls when you're using these tables. Of the 2, I prefer Table Fables 2 just because of the kinds of games that I play. I find this to be one of the most useful books in my collection because this has things for generating for random hooks, for adventures, for quests and rewards, for wilderness and travel, ship, island, and ocean travel, NPCs and enemies, all kinds of different items, including weapons and magical armor, books and tools. It has ways of generating dungeons, buildings, towns and cities, worlds and kingdoms, and religions with a cult and god generator, all in just under 100 or just over 100 pages. Super cool. Now, I would love to see deluxe versions of these. A deluxe hardcover version, possibly with more art, I think would be awesome. I would like to see these expanded with maybe a little bit more flavor text, just a little bit more flavor. Some just deluxe versions of these, I think, would go a long way to making them stand out even more. But as far as the information goes, you just can't get better than Table Fables 1 and Table Fables 2. Okay, so that's all of the tools on this list. The next entries will be all games. And now we're going to move into number 4 on the list. And number 4 is my Fallen packet here. Fallen from Perplexing Ruins, of course, friend of the channel. But Fallen is a really neat system. It has just about everything you need. If you buy the full version, you will get Fallen, you will get your solo Oracle, and you can also pick up this Hill Grab, which is a city adventure supplement for Fallen role-playing. Now, Fallen is not specifically made for solo, but it can be easily adapted to solo, especially using this Oracle and this icon MacGuffin generator that the game does come with. What I really do like about Fallen is the skill system. It uses an interesting skill system that gives you ideas of how to handle successes and failures. And that's one of the best things about this system, is that it makes role-playing from using skills very, very easy. I also like the character generation. I think it's interesting. And I think the exploration is interesting. It's very gamey. It uses a point crawl system, and you will be using your skills as moves to explore. And I really, really do like that. It has a lot of generators. A lot of the generators are just a single word. So I would like to see one negative, and one thing I would like to see more of is a more detailed version of this game. Just this exact game, but maybe fleshed out to twice the length with a little more, with a few more handcrafted things for generating random things within this world. But in my little packet here, I have Fallen, I have my Oracle card, I have my Heel Grab, my city expansion, and then I have some character sheets. Perplexing Ruins has also made these very, very handy little solo pamphlets that you can use for adventures. And then in my pack, I also have the Symbolic City Follow the Bones. This isn't actually part of the Fallen world, but I think this fits the theme really well. And this is an interesting way of generating quests within that setting. And then we have Tattered Leaves, and this is a procedural forest crawl for Fallen. And this is created by Chocolips, a friend of the channel. You've heard us mention his name before, Brandon Yu. And this is a neat little kind of forest crawl that you can use for playing Fallen. I have some more character sheets there, and then there is my Heel Garb. And I just keep all of this together. This is my little Fallen package when I want to play something that's not a traditional fantasy, something that's maybe closer to From Software's Bloodborne. Maybe a little bit more of a Victorian kind of steampunky revolution style, maybe more of a Warhammer fantasy roleplay setting. Fallen is kind of my go-to when it comes to that. And now blasting off into outer space, we have the science fiction entry for today, and that is Space Aces, the new guidebook. I did someone recently do a video on Space Aces, and I love this game. I think this game is just fantastic. It has everything you need to run super pulpy adventures in outer space. If you want to play something like Firefly or Stainless Steel Rat or Cowboy Bebop, this is the game for you. It has a very simple rules system, and all of the rules actually fit on your character card here. It's a basic D20 system, and you will also roll a D6 to come up with some twists and different ways, different outcome. You have very simple stats. The mechanisms for this game are very simple, but they all they all work together to create interesting, fun games that force you as the player to make decisions to drive the story. And I think that is super, super important. And that's especially utilized in this heat level, where as you are adventuring, as you are causing chaos throughout the galaxy, the heat level will rise. That's kind of like your wanted level. And you can set certain milestones to happen at certain heat levels. Just super cool. It comes with this MacGuffin maker in case you need to roll up just some random icons. But the rest of the book, the main part of the book, is a bunch of random tables for creating missions and episodes. This is an episodic game, kind of like an anime or a television show like Star Trek or Firefly. And it has space encounters, it has planet encounters, it has ways of navigating space, friends and enemies, gizmos and gadgets, mechs. So if you're into mechs, you can create mechs in this so you can be a mech pilot. It has a monster generation. Just, yeah, so cool, so fun, so whimsical, and pulpy and fun. And I know that they are making a super big expanded version of Space Aces. And I think it's going to be something like 200 pages. So it will have all of this plus so much more. And I can't wait. I'm kind of sitting there like, well, when is that new Space Ace book coming out? Because I want to play it. Okay, so coming in at number 2 is kind of the game that really did get me into solo role playing. This is the game, I think this is the game that made it kind of finally make sense. And that is Scarlet Heroes from Kevin Crawford. Scarlet Heroes is an all-in-one system. This slim volume is everything you would need to have hours and hours and hours of fun solo role-playing time. At the end of the book here, you will get all of your solo rules here. So you have all of your solo gaming, you have all of your oracles, you have all of your ways to generate NPCs and different actors and all of their personalities. And then you have systems for generating urban adventures, a whole system for generating wilderness adventures, and then a system for generating dungeon adventures. And all of this is based off of a very easy kind of OSR style Dungeons and Dragons system. So if you're familiar with Dungeons and Dragons or any of the old kind of D20 systems with descending armor classes, then you will feel right at home with Scarlet Heroes. It's one thing that I think this game does better than just about any other game is it makes you as a solo player feel powerful. So this game is designed from the ground up for either solo, one hero, or one GM and one player. And so if you want to play games where you are playing characters like Conan or Elric or Fafhrd or Grey Mouser or Dilvish or any of the great sword and sorcery heroes who do heroic things and they defy death left and right and they're really good at what they do. If you want to feel good at what you do, play Scarlet Heroes. You know, this is kind of the exact opposite of Dungeon Crawl Classics. That game makes you feel really bad at what your character does because they could die by sneezing wrong. And that really can't happen in Scarlet Heroes. The system is fun, it's very fast, it's quick. And I just can't say enough good things about Scarlet Heroes. All of the core rules can fit on one page, which is really, really nice. And it's also super easy to adapt other stuff to Scarlet Heroes. One negative is the kind of pseudo Pan-Asian theme of the world, of the setting. It can make, you know, if you want to use minis, if you want to use standees, it can make it difficult for finding representations of the monsters of the bestiary because it uses a very kind of exotic and unique style of bestiary. So that is one maybe mark against it. However, that is very, very easily alleviated by simply adding a $4 expansion to your game of Scarlet Heroes, and that is the small version of White Box Fantasy Medieval Adventure Game. This fits right into Scarlet Heroes. They're both based off of the same system. You don't have to do any kind of converting. And I will almost always use White Box to be my standard fantasy bestiary. And so these two things together are just A+, S tier. You really, really can't get better, especially for that kind of typical sword and sorcery, dungeon crawling fantasy style game. Okay, and coming in number 1, probably no surprise whatsoever, and that is Morkborg with Solitary Defilement. I love these two things together, and one of the reasons why is because they are so dead simple to use. Morkborg is just one of the most simple games out there. All of the rules can fit on a single page, and I really do appreciate how streamlined it is. I like simple games where the rules don't get in the way of my fun. However, Morkborg supplements its simple rules with very ornate lore and background and art and all the flavor things, all the flavorful encounters and just weirdness that you can add on to those simple rules. One thing I also love about Morkborg is just reading the books. I've said that many times before. I think Reading and collecting Morkborg is a hobby in and of itself, completely separate from playing Morkborg. I would not be surprised if there are people who buy Morkborg books who don't play the games. They just like them as books. As a book collector, I love collecting these books. I like reading them. I like looking at them. I think they are very well made works of art, and they scratch a completely different part of my brain than the game does. However, I also really happen to like the game. Now, I know some people complain that there really isn't much of a game here. It's 80% art and flavor. And I think I can understand that argument. But I also think that the game sometimes doesn't get the recognition it deserves just because of how simple it is, but it does so much with so little. And that's one of the things that I appreciate most about the game. You might find a magical item that just says, hey, you can use this to create a potion once a day. Okay, well, how do I do that? Well, it's up to you to come up with it. Morkborg plants a lot of seeds in the player's mind. And then how you water those seeds, how you cultivate the fruit from those trees that those seeds produce, that's kind of up to you. And so some people like that. Some people like me like that. Other people don't. Other people want things spelled out. They want things precise, and I totally get that. And one side isn't better than the other, but I think one side can appeal more to the other. But another great thing about Morkborg is all of the supplements, all of the fan-made material for it. They have a very liberal third-party license agreement where anybody can make stuff for Morkborg as long as it follows just a couple simple rules. Don't be racist, don't be transphobic, don't be homophobic, don't be an asshole, basically, and you can make stuff for Morkborg, and I like that. It's such a great community, and you can find things that are really ornately produced, like this box set of Solitary Defilement from Max Moon. Or you can go onto itch.io and just download all kinds of print-on-demand PDF versions of all of these things and make your own. Our friend Chocolips, Brandon Yu, of course, made Solitary Depths, which is an expansion for Solitary Defilement. And Solitary Defilement was created by Idiots, ID 10 plus 5 there. And Solitary Defilement is kind of the official, unofficial solo rules for Morkborg. And this was highly inspired by Ironsworn and Ironsworn Starforged, of course. Now, I am not a huge fan of Ironsworn or Starforged. For me, they are too complex. There's too many options. And Solitary Defilement kind of takes that idea of moves and boils them down to just a lot fewer moves. And I find that this game, this version of those rules are just easier to comprehend for me. And Solitary Defilement comes with things for dungeon crawling, for micro crawling, for city crawling. You will get Alone in the Crowd, which is all of your rules for generating cities and having city adventures. And then it also comes with a whole bunch of, or 3 adventures that you can go on for solo adventures. And these are very inspiring. So you could take this idea here, this simple kind of adventure, and then just make your own after you've gone through these 3 adventures. But I always have fun playing Morkborg, especially when played with Solitary Defilement. I think it is a great system. It's also very easy to play as a co-op RPG where you can share GM duties simply by passing around the Solitary Defilement book. Who's ever holding the book is the GM. And then so everybody can play and everybody can GM. But I can't get enough Morkborg. I love being in this world. I love playing in the world. Now, I do play with some house rules because I find that the rules as written, your characters are highly disposable. And that's supposed to be, that's how the game is designed. But I like keeping my characters alive longer to have more adventures with them, having a more sword and sorcery style, a more Conan, a more Elric style of fantasy. And so I just simply add 1 stat to my characters. And the characters normally have, let's see, what are the stats here? They have ability, presence, strength, and toughness. So I add 1 stat called determination. And you've heard me talk about this determination stat before. It's in the game that I'm designing in a different kind of, maybe in a little bit of a different implementation. But that is a stat, that's my sword and sorcery stat. That's the stat that is a currency that I can spend a point of to defy death or to make the cool thing happen. And so all of my characters start with 6 determination, and they have that determination for their entire adventuring career. And they can use that to get out of tight spots. Like, let's say you're on a cliff and you fall, and normally your character would just die because they're falling 200 feet down to their death. Well, I could spend a point of determination to avoid that. But to do so, I have to come up with a neat story. And so that a neat narrative hook, a neat drive for that ability to defy death. And so what that does is it forces me as the solo player to drive the story to make something happen. And that's one thing that is very hard for a lot of people, and myself included, to grasp as the solo player is you need to take control as the GM sometimes and just make the thing happen. And so with determination, if I was falling off that cliff down to my death, I could spend 1 point of determination and say, okay, I'm falling, but then this huge winged demon bat thing comes and it picks me up and takes me back to its nest. And so now not only have I averted death, which would just be an end to that story, but now I've created something that will allow me to continue my character and will allow for more adventure. I've taken an ending and turned it into a beginning. And I think that's a really important thing to do when you are playing solo role-playing, is to take control of the steering wheel and drive the story to make the kind of story you want to make. Also, working in all of those unique and random elements that we all love so much. And with all of those things combined, Morkborg and Solitary Defilement are my favorite ways of playing solo role-playing games. So, all right, you guys, well, I hope you enjoyed this top 10 solo RPG list. We will talk to you later. Bye-bye.